Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to start. It's, again, as usual, a super packed room, which is extremely exciting. I don't have room at the front for people to sit at my feet like they were at the anti-Brexit meeting, which I think was the spirit of the meeting, even though it was simply a Brexit meeting earlier this week. What I'm going to ask, as usual, so I'm guessing there's no gaps. So if there's any spaces, please move in so that people can sit down. Also, if you're sitting and you can see somebody standing who looks less able to stand than you are, could you be kind and give up your seat for somebody to sit down? But apparently that's not going to happen, so there we are. The Remainers were much kinder to everyone else. Okay. I'm just checking now to see if there's any more movement. Okay, let's begin then. My mic is actually a bit quiet. Can you turn me up, please? It's unusual for me not to be the loudest thing anyway. Okay, that's a bit better. Right. Welcome, everyone, to the very now traditional SERA rally. It's our chance to hear from the leading people in the Labour Party about what we're going to do on the environment, what our plans are. The theme of this year's event is rapid response. So I'm going to ask the speakers to be similar in their approach to speaking, to be rapid, and to warn you that there is no response. This is not a Q&A session. There's no chance of you asking that. We've got 1 million speakers. They come up, they speak, they're amazing. We applaud them. They go on to the next event. We get the next speaker, okay? Meanwhile, there's absolute chaos going on here. You know the routine. Jake and I, we're like a swan, but only the bottom bit is evident. So he and I are two legs paddling very quickly while you look at the swans of the speakers. And the reason is we don't know what order people arrive at. People come and they have to go to other events. Okay, so forgive the chaos that's going on here and ignore that because it's really not very interesting. Pay attention to the amazing speakers. Have I forgotten anything else? Can we join SERA? Yeah. I've said this so many times already this week. If anyone is here, particularly people, is there wine already? No wine yet. Oh, okay. So I can't even charge you for the wine, right? If you're here and you like what we do and you're not a member of SERA, please join SERA. You can do it online. You can do it right now because there's some signal. So the address, it's sera.org.uk. It doesn't cost very much to join, and every penny that you pay for membership, we use in our campaigns and in our events and things like that. So you are much valued and much appreciated if you do join. Have I remembered everything now? Yep. Okay, so I'm now going to introduce our first speaker, who is Diane. Oh, the other thing I should warn you, I'm really bad at introducing people. So Diane Abbott. Go for it.
Well, at least you didn't say needs no introduction. My name is Diane Abbott. I'm the Member of Parliament for Hackney, North and Stoke Newington, and I'm Shadow Home Secretary. But I'm here today to talk about issues around climate, and I'm pleased to be here because I think that concerns about climate and Extinction Rebellion are coming higher and higher up people's agenda. I've just come from a debate around Brexit, the Labour Party conference, but I think that although the Westminster bubble is obsessed with Brexit, I think that in the forthcoming general election, and we do believe there's going to be a general election before Christmas, we will find that issues about climate, the issues raised by Extinction Rebellion, the leadership showed by Greta Thunberg, we will find people talking about that. And one of the things that impresses me as a Member of Parliament is how engaged younger people are in this issue, more engaged in this issue than many other issues. And I meet all the time who say it's their children lobbying them to stop using single-use plastics, to recycle, to try and use solar panels. So I think the surge of energy and concern coming from younger people is very important. The other thing I wanted to say is I'm concerned about climate, but I'm also concerned about climate justice. I think climate is too important an issue just to be confined with perhaps people who have the leisure to think about it. I represent Hackney. It's a very diverse constituency, and I can tell you that many of my constituents who originate from the Caribbean or Bangladesh, other small island states or low-level states like Bangladesh are concerned about climate. Very concerned, because you know, when they have the hurricane, when they have the tornado, when they have the rising waters, they are the ones that have to write to their relatives back home and give them the money to replace the roof, to contribute to fixing the roads. Our diverse communities are perhaps more engaged with climate in a very real way than others. And I think it is a challenge for the climate movement to bring those people into the campaign, because of the difficult choices that politicians have to make about climate. The more people that are engaged with it, the broader range of people that are engaged with it, the easier it will be to push through those choices in politics. So as I say, the people who are most vulnerable to climate change are often people in small island states and low-lying areas of the world. So it's an important issue. Young people are definitely engaged in it. I think we're going to find in the election that all voters from all sorts of parties are going to be raising it. I think there's a big challenge in engaging our diverse communities with these issues, but there can be no more important issues than climate, because it's the future of the planet and it's our children's future. Thank you very much for inviting me.
That was great. That was fantastic. We've never had you here before. We will invite you back. You were interesting and spot on, so well done. I also judge, so there we are. I can't help it. What I forgot to say, actually, I'm so bad at introductions. Those who haven't met me, I'm Melanie Smallman. I'm one of the co-chairs of SERA, and this is Jake Sumner, who's the other co-chair, but I don't allow to speak today, so I'm joking. Okay, next up, Liam, are you happy? Oh, we have Liam Byrne, who is, I'm looking at my list, your Shadow Digital Minister.
Shadow Digital Minister, yes. So I'm Liam Byrne, I'm the Member of Parliament for Hodge Hill. I'm one of the candidates standing to be the Metro Mayor in the West Midlands, and it's a huge relief to be here after a week in which we watched the 19th Etonian and the 20th Etonian to become Prime Minister argue it out about whose fault it was that the country is now in such a mess. I don't know about you, it was like the worst ever episode of Downton Abbey I've ever seen. And surely, definitive evidence that we were right finally to push through the abolition of private schools, starting with Eton. So, like Diane, I think that Extinction Rebellion, the young climate strikers, they have taught us a valuable lesson. It is simply not acceptable for our politics to remain frozen while our planet is getting hotter. And so I was proud to be there in the House of Commons, voting to declare a climate emergency. I was proud to go straight back to Birmingham to bring together over 120 people in our first Citizens' Assembly, and proud that from that we began to set out what are the principles for a route to zero carbon for our region. It was simply magnificent because we had young people in their school uniform together with people from all kinds of backgrounds, with people in their 70s and 80s, coming together as citizens of the region to define a future for the region. Now look, for us in the West Midlands, this is important because it was in our region 307 years ago that the first steam engine was demonstrated. We were the region that kick-started the carbon revolution. Now, we want to be the region that leads the zero carbon revolution. But if we want to turn that broad principle into action, we can't leave that task to the tender mercies of the marketplace. We need a green development corporation to build the green homes of the future and help us tackle the housing crisis. We need a green energy company to roll out solar left, right, and centre. We need a national education service. We need to found the national education service to make sure that we've actually got the skills to do the job. We need a regional investment bank to provide the stakes in green manufacturing for the future. We need an office of community wealth building so that the public money that we spend isn't going to companies that are headquartered in tax havens, but they're actually creating jobs for the people we came into politics to serve. That is what a green industrial revolution means for us. Now, you set that up, take a step back, and look at it. Clive Lewis sometimes says that what this agenda needs is emergency socialism. He's right. But what I've just described to you used to be called something else. It used to be called municipal socialism. And actually, in regions like mine, it was that municipal socialism of 120 years ago that were instrumental in making sure that we were a city of 1,000 trades, the workshop of the world. We have done this before, therefore we can do it again. What we need to go back is draw inspiration from our socialist history and reinvent it for new times. Now, Diane is right to say the principles that we've got to develop are threefold: decarbonisation, jobs and justice. We produce in our region 0.5 tonne of carbon for every woman, man and child every single month. That's got to come down to net zero. But look, we've also got 20,000 people, young people, under the age of 25, who are out of work. So whatever we do has got to create jobs for those young people to build those careers of the future. But look, we've also got 300,000 people in our region who live in energy poverty. We've got to lift those families up out of poverty for the first time. So we can design an approach that decarbonises, creates jobs and delivers justice, but only if we build the municipal socialism that worked so well in the past. Nye Bevan only ever wrote one book, In Place of Fear, and on the penultimate page is a quote that has stayed with me ever since I read it. He said, Progress is not the elimination of struggle, but rather a change in its terms. The terms of our politics have changed fundamentally, and it's time we gripped hold of this agenda, reinvented ourselves as Green Labour, swept aside this Tory muddle, and replaced it with a Labour model. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That was amazing. Next, are you ready? Sue Hayman, the Shadow Secretary of State for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs. And really, it's my first time seeing you this week, so hello.
Yes, that's very true, actually. Normally we spend the whole time bumping into each other. No, it's fantastic to be here, and it's just, look at the number of people here. It just shows you how important this issue is to so many people. And I was talking at an event at the Woodland Trust just before I came here, and one of the questions we were asked is, have people changed their opinion about the emergency that we face? Do they genuinely think that there is a climate and environment emergency? Because without people buy-in, it's going to be difficult to achieve. And the answer I gave to that was, actually, I think we have hit a turning point. I genuinely think that. Back at the end of March, when I was doing DEFRA questions, and I said to the government, will you join the Labour Party in declaring a climate and environment emergency? They refused to do that. They gave a kind of fudged answer. By the time we got to the 1st of May, when Jeremy and myself and Rebecca Long-Bailey put the motion to Parliament to declare a climate and environment emergency, they didn't call a vote. They knew that they could not beat that going through Parliament. And that showed that there had been a sea change between the 29th of March and the 1st of May. And I think a lot of that is down to the Greta Thunberg. It's down to the Youth Strike Action people. It's down to Extinction Rebellion. It's down to ordinary people standing up and saying, enough is enough. You have to listen to us. You have to take action. And it's unbelievably frustrating that Brexit is getting in the way of everything that we need to do. That motion passed on the 1st of May gave the government 6 months to come up with a plan, what it was going to do. 1st of May, 6 months. When does that run out? Their last day to come up with a plan is the 31st of October. And that's the huge problem we have. There is so many things that we need to be doing in Parliament that are being scuppered by Brexit, but none are as important as getting together a serious plan, proper action plan, properly resourced to tackle this climate and environment emergency that faces us. Now, we in the Labour Party have been working on our plan. We've got a cross-shadow cabinet group that work together on this, and we are serious about doing this, serious about taking action, right across, whether it's my department in DEFRA, whether it's Emily in the Foreign Office, because this is a global problem, whether it's Andy in transport, John in health, whether it's planning, Andrew Gwynn doing that. We cannot tackle this if we sit in our silos. And that is why John McDonald's announcement about the Treasury commitment is such a game changer, such a game changer. None of us can ever achieve anything unless the Treasury agrees to give us the money. And the Treasury has said, under John McDonnell, that we will have a green Treasury, a green government backed up by a green Treasury. And that's when we start making the difference. Now, you look at what the Tories have done. We are about to leave the European Union if Boris Johnson gets his way. So what does he do just before that? He ditches all the bills we've been working on for years. He ditches the agriculture bill. He ditches the environment bill. He ditches the fisheries bill. So if we do crash out at some point with no deal, or we have a very bad deal, the impact on our environmental protections will be immense. And we cannot allow that to happen. So it's fantastic to see so many people. It's brilliant that I've had all week so much support and buy-in from people attending conference, because we have to work together. It's only by, I think, the common voice calling the government to account now that we are going to be able to stop them doing so much damage to our environment. And we need to get that Labour government in place so that we can genuinely turn things around and make a difference. Thank you.
I think Sue deserves another applause because she's got what I think is the worst job in the world, because she actually has to shadow Michael Gove. So, no, not anymore. He's gone, I've forgotten. God, you did for long enough. Theresa Villiers is even worse.
Who makes Michael Gove an absolute environmentalist.
I've blocked the recent past out, so I'm sorry. Apologies to the other speakers, but Emily has to dash off. So, I'm absolutely delighted that next up we have Emily Thornberry.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to use this. I'm not going to use it. I'm so delighted to be here. They're recording it. Oh, you're recording it? Okay. All right, I'm doing it on a mic. I'm so delighted to be here. And, wait, has she gone? Has Sue gone? Okay, good, because I can now talk to you honestly about her. That woman, talk about depth of knowledge, talk about passion. You know, imagine anyone being a better DEFRA Secretary of State than Sue Hayman. And you know what? I've been to her house, and I know what climate change is actually doing to her house. And the amount of times she has to ring up her neighbours and get them to put up the blockades because the rain is so bad that her house gets regularly flooded. She's passionate, she has great politics, she knows what she's talking about, but she also lives climate change every day. No one could be a better Secretary of State. But we have to get her elected, right? We have to get her elected. I'm here to support this great campaigning organisation, which is based in my constituency and has been fighting since 1973 to put environmental concerns onto Labour's agenda, and which has worked so hard to ensure that whatever else is going on at the moment, and there is quite a lot else going on, that we as a party keep our primary focus on climate change, on the climate emergency. Let's be clear about something, comrades. The fight that matters most in our world, the biggest fight that we will ever face, isn't about Brexit or Boris Johnson or Nigel Farage or any of the other issues that we're going to spend our time talking about at this conference. This is the issue, the survival of our planet, the slow dying of our planet. And we have to be honest with ourselves. It is a fight that we are currently losing. I remember a few months ago, the president of Dominica, Roosevelt Skerritt, he addressed delegates at the United Nations, and he said, the global population must see itself at war against climate change. And he went on to say, we must deploy human, technical, and financial resources to the front lines. We must build capacity and resilience and fight as a unified army. Now, I know that many of us on the left have a long and proud tradition of opposing all war and all fighting, but I'm sure that you will agree with me and with the Prime Minister of Dominica that this is a fight that we have to take on and is one that we have to win. For the sake of humanity, it's a war we have to win. But we have a problem. Because the so-called leader of the free world, President Donald J. Trump, has turning his back on every aspect of environmental protection and every global deal on climate change. A president who in January, on the back of 2018, remember 2018? It was last year. And that was the hottest year. It was the hottest year on record for our oceans, the fourth hottest on record for our planet, and he reacted to the freezing temperatures of one American winter by saying, wouldn't it be nice, and I quote, to see some of that good old-fashioned global warming. I mean, Trump's attitude, his deliberate lack of leadership, and his active denial of climate change, and his active effort to weaken environmental standards have given the green light to others. It's bad enough that he does it, but the fact of the matter is that Bolsonaro in Brazil would not be as bold without President Trump. You know, that's the truth. And he continues to deny what's going on. He continues to not take it seriously, even if it means watching his rainforest burned by the logging companies. And of course, at the end of 2020, we may have a new occupant of the White House. But frankly, we shouldn't have to wait for a new president. You know, it is traditionally that the President of the United States leads the free world, but he has just walked away from that space. And the fact is, how do we fill that space now? We don't just sit and wait. We have to step up. And we have to step up collectively. Because if we have to wait for another president, you know, we cannot afford to wait that long to turn the tide and start winning the war. We need to get on with it ourselves, and we have to do it urgently. And that's not just because saving our planet is what ultimately matters. But for those of us who believe in a world of social justice, it is also vital for the billions of people whose lives are being destroyed by climate change today. Coastal communities in some of the poorest countries in the world, whose homes are being threatened by rising sea levels and whose farming land is threatened by salination. Nomadic communities who are threatened by drought and the desert ever increasing, and conflict over land, and indigenous communities who are threatened by the pernicious actions of forest burners and industrial meat producers. So we are not just gathered here in support of this campaign because we want to save the planet. We're also gathered here to save the lives and the livelihoods of billions of the most vulnerable and marginalized people in our world who depend on a healthy planet. And whatever our disagreements, right, that we might have in our politics about Brexit or anything else, we have to agree on the urgency and the priority of this issue. Because if 10 years from now, if climate change has passed the point of no return, if whole species have been wiped out from our planet and the polar ice caps are continuing to just melt away, we will have to face future generations who will say to us, back in 2019, when you still had the chance to do something about this, why didn't you do it? And what are we going to say? I mean, the answer is not, and it cannot be, can it? Well, it was all very difficult because we were all focused on Brexit. Because we rightly they will never forgive us, because there is no more important issue than this one, and no crisis that needs more focus now. And that's why the work of SERA is so vital, and why I am so proud to be here to support you today.
Thank you. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Emily. I've got a queue of speakers now. I'm just going to update the people in the queue what's going to happen. So if you're happy with this, and if you're not, then that's bad. We've got Lloyd, Nia, and Andy, who... I literally can't see you, but yeah, the man in the light. So, yeah, Lloyd, are you happy to come? We've got Lloyd Russell-Moyle, is that how you say your surname? Who I am staying in your constituency right now. You're the Kemptown MP.
It's always lovely to welcome people to Brighton, and as you, in many of your hotels, will look out to the sea, and you'll see a wind farm that we're incredibly proud of being built. It was opened up last year, went online last year, the Rampion wind farm. Problem is, they are far too far between each other. They are not being built at the rate that we need, and even that particular installation had the capacity to be double that size, but because of economics, because of the fact that things were uncertain, the companies decided not to use all the space to develop. Now, one could say, oh, well, that's just an unfortunate quirk of, the market. That's how things work. If we're to be serious about climate change, if we're to be serious about changing our modes of generating different parts of modes of generating different kinds of electricity from different sources, then we can't just let the market decide. We can't just let it happen that you build half a wind farm with all the infrastructure it takes to build that and then withdraw that infrastructure and say, well, maybe in 10 years' time we'll come and finish the rest, which is what we've said with Rampion. I don't blame companies. I don't blame the people that have done it, but I blame the government for not providing a framework in which it is economically advantageous to make sure that we are building to maximum capacity in, for example, renewable energy. I blame the government, of course, for banning onshore wind farms, which we now know are the most economically viable forms of renewable energy that we could be producing. I don't blame individuals for not installing solar panels on their houses anymore, and we've seen a reduction of almost 90% of take-up of PV on roofs. But I blame the government for fiddling with the feed-in tariffs. And yes, maybe the feed-in tariffs were very generous. But if you're going to be serious about tackling climate change, changing the modes of electricity generation and the modes of electricity usage so that people understand how they have to change their patterns of usage on an individual level, then maybe it's quite right that these feed-in tariffs should be generous. It's quite right that we should be encouraging people and benefiting people not just punishing people, but benefiting people that choose to do the right thing. So I don't blame individuals if they don't install those things. I don't blame companies, but we must blame the government. Because the reality is now, the lack of action is leading us to a stage where we are hurtling towards the abyss, are we not? And my personal view from reading some of the science, and I'm not a real scientist, although my brother informs me about these things all the time. He is a physicist and loves this area. My feeling is that we probably are already over the tipping point. What we are now talking about is the clawback point. If we stopped tomorrow and just did nothing, we would probably face runaway climate change. It's not 100% sure, but I think we are probably at that cusp now that we've gone over the tipping point, as it were. But we do have a few years, possibly 11 years, to claw that back, to make immediate activities in 11 years to stop, and then the next period of 10 to 15 years to actually reverse, and in some places actually become carbon negative rather than just carbon neutral. This is a huge task, and it's not going to happen by just expecting people to do it naturally. It must happen with a huge education program in our schools, in our factories, in our workplaces. And it is an indictment that we don't have a proper sustainable development education part of our curriculum. When I was at, and I must finish now, I know, when I was at Bradford University, we started a program. It's unfortunately finished broadly now, but when I was on the board and the council and senate at Bradford University, we started a program, and it was a program initially of building new buildings to get them to the highest BREEAM standard that we could. And through that process, we realised that actually what you needed to do is not just integrate the physical part of education, we needed to integrate the academic part of our institution. And we said for a period of 10 years this policy lasted, that we would not approve any course, whether it be in medicine, optometry, whether it be in peace studies, which was the department that I was in, or whether it be in engineering, unless every single course had a sustainable development part integrated in it. That is the kind of things that we need to integrate in our universities, in our schools, and if we don't, I'm afraid it will be far too late by the time we get round to realising. Thank you.
Thank you. That was fantastic. And it just made me realise, Jake, I don't know if you know, we've been doing these rallies for 8 years. And if we've got 11 years left to, I mean, I don't want to think about what it'll be like in another 11 years. I don't want us to be here having a rally in 11 years' time saying we wish we'd done something about it. So hopefully we'll have a rally saying, isn't it great we did do something about it? I don't know. Let's dream. So next up, I've got Neil Griffiths, who is a long-standing SERA member and the shadow, no, you're not the shadow Secretary of Transport, shadow Defence Secretary. Oh yes, have that one.
Right, thank you very much indeed. Right, thank you. Never very sure about holding these microphones. I hope you can all hear, and I'll try not to do too much gesticulating, in which case the microphone goes away from my mouth. So I'm going to speak to you today as a Welsh MP, and I'm going to tell you about what's happening in Wales, where, of course, we do have a Labour government, because it's so important that we all learn from each other and we obviously pool the great ideas that we do have. And I'd like to just say, first of all, Byrne was talking about municipal activity, and that is just so important, getting back from centralisation to decentralisation in many respects. And that's where, as a start, where we have Labour-controlled councils, there are opportunities. So I'd just like to say it's fantastic to be at SERA, and let's not forget what the S is in SERA. It's the Socialist Environmental Resource Association. So it's really important that we are not only absolutely committed to climate change, but we are committed to social justice and delivering climate change with social justice. And that's been a mark of what we've been trying to do in Wales. Now, we had a leadership contest last autumn, and Mark Drakeford was the the front runner of the candidates, and he said very clearly, he said, look, I could be elected to this post, I could be elected to be the leader of the Labour Party in Wales and de facto First Minister of the Labour government in Wales. Therefore, everything I promise must be deliverable. And that is the difference between some of the smaller parties that will promise the earth and us as a responsible Labour Party who know that we could be in power, and what we promise must be deliverable. And he's absolutely committed both to climate change and to social justice. So it was no surprise, really, in the spring when obviously climate change was highlighted, that the Welsh Government immediately in April declared a climate emergency. Now, that wasn't just because somebody was waving a banner outside the window, because back in the March of last year, the Welsh Government had actually produced a document, a detailed document, 200 pages. You don't produce that overnight. And the title of that document was Prosperity for All, a Low-Carbon Wales. And I think that's such an important title. Prosperity for All, a Low-Carbon Wales. Absolutely tying in social justice to the action we need to combat climate change. But of course, we have had a track record in Wales, from the very simple thing of back in 2011 being the first to put a charge on a plastic bag, to our excellent record on upping recycling targets in Wales. But we are limited because we are only a devolved power. We don't have the powers that we obviously would expect the UK government to have. And if we had a UK Labour government, we could deliver so much more. And we have been, just like everybody else, very badly hit by austerity. Nearly all of what Welsh Government delivers are frontline services, health, education, council services, and a bit of economic development. So we're under the same constraints as many of you in your local councils are. So let's get back to the prosperity for all and a low-carbon Wales and some of the things that we really want to do. We have managed in Wales to keep going part of what used to be called Building Schools for the Future across the UK. We call it 21st Century Schools, and we have tried to be consistently low carbon in the types of buildings that we've produced. And in terms of the actual document, some of the interesting features in there, which I think we need to really take notice of, are things like local ownership of electricity. Currently in Wales, 17% of our renewables are actually locally owned, but we have a commitment that by next year, 2020, all renewable installations will have some community ownership. And then we're hoping that we are intending to make it happen by 2030, that we will have a gigawatt of renewables actually locally owned. Now, in terms of target, just to give you a quick update on that, we are looking to make 70% of our electricity from renewables, and we are really trying to make a carbon neutral public sector by 2030. So those are just some of the ideas. And just to talk about that mentality being changed, when we're talking about single-use plastic bottles, we're actually talking about creating a culture where people can go and ask for their permanent container to be filled with water. So it's about that social aspect as well as about the climate change aspect. I leave you with that thought and finish there. Thank you.
Diolch yn fawr ni, I can speak Welsh. Okay, we've got a list. I'm going to give you the list of speakers coming up so they can prepare themselves. I've got Andy McDonald, Marvin Reese, and Francis O'Grady. If you want to come and grab a seat down here, we've got a bit of a queue. But let's get moving. Andy, you're next up, and then there's a seat for Marvin. So, delighted to introduce Andy McDonald, who is the Shadow Transport Secretary.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Great pleasure to be with you, and it's great to follow Nia because what she perhaps omitted was Mark Drakeford's courage and the decision he made over the M4, which was a critically important move. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm the Shadow Transport Secretary. I'm wanting that shorter job title. I hope to get it soon. But I thought I might talk to you about transport. It seems quite relevant given the job I do. And look, transport's the single largest source of greenhouse gas emissions for us in the UK, and it's the worst performing sector when it comes to reducing carbon emissions. They've actually gone up since 2010. And for far too long, transport's been put in the too difficult box as far as climate change is concerned. And that's going to change under Labour. We're going to put an end to paying lip service to looking after our planet, and instead we'll ensure we put our moral responsibility to cut emissions at the department's core, and we will allocate departmental spending as if climate change really matters. And under my leadership, I want to see the department set carbon budgets consistent with the obligations of the Paris Agreement on climate change. And this will require a shift away from modes of transport that are dependent on fossil fuels towards sustainable modes. And we require a modal shift towards public transport and cycling and walking, and to decarbonise road transport by accelerating the transition from diesel and petrol to electric vehicles. And the Tories continue to boast that they're investing more than ever in England's major road network. And we know that road building begets traffic, which in turn begets emissions. You build a road, it will fill up as soon as you've built it. The government's colossal road building programme is environmentally unsustainable and will drive traffic growth and worsen congestion, failing even on its own terms. So that's why I would reallocate an almost £30 billion fund for road building to a sustainable transport fund. And research shows that 6 out of 10 motorists would travel by public transport instead of, if public transport was better, they'd use it. And I want to make that happen. And there are more journeys, as we all know in this room, are made by bus than any other form of public transport. But colossal cuts to bus budgets have caused a 10% decline in patronage, leaving people and communities isolated and worsening car dependency. So Labour will completely reverse the Tory cuts to bus services that they've had since 2010. We will reinstate every single one of them and put the same money back to increase those options. And we know, don't we, that people who learn to drive in their mid-20s, rather than their teens, as they would in my area, get to drive a car, you're going to be economically engaged. Without it, you can't be. But if you do make that transition, they're going to drive 30% less for the remainder of their lives. So we're going to provide the funds for free bus travel for everyone under the age of 25 to those local authorities who introduce bus re-regulation or move to public ownership of their local bus services. And of course, our plans to renationalise the railway is also critical to drive up public transport use. And our privatised rail system is completely fragmented and fractured and on its own terms has completely failed. Under privatisation, the social, economic and environmental aims have been subsumed to the pursuit of corporate profit under the misguided idea that a railway can be designed as a competitive marketplace. It can't. We've made clear that the next Labour government will take a different approach, reintegrating the railway under public ownership. That'll make improvements to increase patronage that are frustrated under privatisation, and will be reforming fares to make it simple to use, and will be integrating that with other modes of transport. And electrifying the railways is vital to decarbonising rail and meeting our climate change objectives. And the government's decided to halt a lot of that electrification programme to save a few £1 million. And of course, not often I agree with Philip Hammond, but he did say that he thought the railway was a rich man's toy. So we've got an awful lot to move on from. And what a disgraceful way to describe things. We've got an awful lot to offer on cycling and walking, and please watch this space. We look to countries like the Netherlands to see how they've embraced that concept. We have got to do exactly that, and as Labour Cycling says, cycling should be for the many, not the brave. We've got We've got a terrific amount to do on EVs. You've seen the announcements. We've got to get that shift. There's more to come. I've got lots more to say on these issues, but please just watch this space. I'll just touch on Heathrow. I voted against Heathrow's expansion because in the debate I argued that to expand Heathrow is to ignore the climate crisis. And it's a disgrace that Chris Grayling authorised those plans that failed to take into account the UK climate change commitments. I'll conclude, Chair. I'm cut my remarks. I'm tremendously proud of how the Labour movement is rising to the challenge of the climate crisis, and I'm excited about our current plans and policies that's going to be developed over the coming months. And I'm even more excited about delivering in government. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. It's also reminded me of my true calling as a bus conductor. I'm going to stop the bus for a second. There's a seat there. If anyone's standing and wants to sit down, then clamber through the crowd. Oh no? Yes? Are there any other seats that are free that I can't see? No? Good. Right. Okay. I can get on with driving the bus now. So, yeah, just to remind everyone who wasn't here at the beginning, our theme is rapid response. So what we want is rapid talks and no response other than applause, okay? Them's the rules tonight. So, next up on my list, we have Marvin Reese, who is the Mayor of Bristol. Welcome. Thanks.
So I will try to be very rapid. As a city leader, what we do have to do is recognise the interdependencies of the challenges we face. And I've been sharing with people that right now we have a climate emergency, but that's what's landing on my streets is also a political economic emergency and a social emergency with social fragmentation, division, social isolation, and all those other ills that are both interacting with the climate emergency we're facing at the moment. Since my time in office, I didn't come in with this agenda, but it didn't take long for me to share with a number of other mayors around the world a common understanding that we believe we've reached the end of what national governments working alone can do for us on the major crises of our time, from climate change to migration to inequality to democratic legitimacy. And what we are needing now is a reordering of global sovereignty, where we have the leaders of cities and networks of cities as equal partners in shaping national and international policy. Not the people that pick up the instructions from that's my map. Telling me how to get here. Yeah, it's a bit late, wasn't it? And a number of us mayors have been linking up. I'm off to C40 in Copenhagen next month. I'm on the board of the Mayors Migration Council. And what we've done as a collection of mayors is again to say we will not have a conversation on a global migration crisis without talking about the climate emergency, and look at the interdependency between the two. And C40, they're going to be talking about the manifestations of the climate emergency, in part being about the global migration crisis, with all the other things this kicks off. It's also the case that cities need to be in charge, because that is where I think original ideas that are driven on real delivery, not banter, is going to be made something solid. There's a practical reality to this too. That we've got about 4 billion people living in cities at the moment. By 2050, there'll be an additional 2.5 billion people, most of the world now living in cities. And so that's where stuff gets real. What I'm contending with, a population that's going to grow by 100,000 over the next 25 years, a housing crisis right now, a transport crisis right now, a health crisis and an energy crisis right now. And how do we minimize the CO2 price we pay for being able to host and enable people in my city to live? Among the things that we are doing, I think we're in many ways quite innovative. I don't like this kind of false competition about who's the first. Everyone's doing what they do. But what we've got is a £1 billion programme called City Leap that offers an opportunity to transform the city's relationship with energy, from generation to distribution to storage to usage. Then that is £1 billion that we've gone out to the we're trying to get some help from nationals, but we're going to have to go out for the private sector to do that as well. We've got a bus deal coming through, the largest order of biogas buses in the country. We've published a one city plan, recognizing that what we do on climate is not the result of the city council working alone. It's our universities that are small towns in our cities. It's our health service. It's the courts, the criminal justice system, the private sector, voluntary sector. And if we're serious about this, just not playing political games, we've got to capture that collective impact of all those organizations. That plan sets out what everything we're going to do up to 2050. And we've pulled together a board of academics and activists and utilities companies representatives to craft a city pathway up to 2050, but with an emphasis on the next 10 years. If I can just share a couple of things as well, just the final reflections on this. I've heard a phrase a few times where someone said, vote Labour, get Green, vote Red, get Green. And I was quite dismayed by that. One of the things that's drawn me to the Labour Party as someone who's grown up on the underbelly of this country is that the Labour Party takes poverty seriously. And it doesn't say nothing else matters, right? When we tackle climate change, we have to take the issue of poverty and inequality and quality work seriously. It's writ large through the Sustainable Development Goals. And I just urge people, we're not trying to get Labour to get anything else. We're getting Labour to get Labour. And Labour is about social justice and recognising the interdependence between social justice and environmental justice. The last thing I'd say, and we have to take this on, is diversity. Right? I had an experience on Friday where I spoke at the climate strike. Fantastic, right? Puts it on the agenda. 2 hours later, I was speaking to a room of black teachers. My experience of those two interactions was wholly different, right? One, I felt like a guest. One, I felt like these were my people. This is an issue. And if we are serious about building the democratic mandate for the kind of interventions that are going to be needed to make meaningful change, we have to have everyone at the table. Otherwise, we'll be imposing things on people. We have to take poverty, we have to take inclusion, we have to take diversity as seriously as we would ask any of the institutions out there to take it. Just because we're a social justice movement, it doesn't let us off the hook, all right? Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that, Marvin, before you run away. That was amazing and really important reminder that, you know, there's lots of green groups knocking around at the moment, but SERA is the one that has always put people on the same footing as the planet and the planet on the same footing as people. There's no point in having one without the other. So, you know, we have to remember exactly those points that Marvin was making, so much appreciated. Next, we have a speaker that I've been wanting to get to our rally for a long time, so I'm really glad that diaries have worked out, and we've got Frances O'Grady, who's the General Secretary of the TUC.
Better late than never, eh? First off, just to say a big, big thanks to SERA for everything you do. I think it's a fantastic organisation and you do amazing work. And it's had an impact. You know, you listen to members of the Shadow Cabinet, you listen to Marvin, or Mervyn, as I nearly called him, Marvin, and you can see the difference. And it seems to me that that difference is all the more sharper now we have a guy in number 10 who likes to describe himself as the Incredible Hulk. He's neither incredible, he's not a Hulk, and he's certainly not green. So I think the choice is becoming all the more clear. But I have to say, from my perspective, you know, they say that the sincerest form of flattery is imitation. And when those students did call for a climate strike, then my ears did prick up, because I found it inspiring that they were, if you like, looking around the world and looking at how you protest and how you stand up for your rights, and they chose a trade union term to do that. And on Friday, I was in Brussels with the ETUC, our European arm, and we were meeting with young women, Belgian activists, climate strike activists. And in fact, I think Marvin would have been inspired by them, because they were so clear and they volunteered the idea that climate justice and social justice have to be the two sides of the same coin, because it can't work one without the other. And that's important to us as a trade union movement because we're part of a global trade union movement. We know that climate change isn't something that's happening down the road. It's already hurting particularly poor people in the global south. We know that. And we know that here in the UK, you talk to our firefighters who are dealing on too few resources with flooding. You talk to our emergency services. You talk to people in public services and in public transport about the contribution that they can and want to make to a greener economy. But we also represent people in aviation and in the car industry, in the steel industry. And I talk to them too, and I think this is important because when I speak to those workers, they are afraid for the future in terms of climate change. They're not stupid. They know what's happening, but they are also afraid for their jobs. And they also need to put food on the table for their families. So I think that's why for us, the call for a just transition is so important because workers have something to offer. We have something to contribute, and we've got to be part of the change that we want to see happen. Just a little anecdote about my dad, who was a shop steward in Cowley in the car industry. Way back in the 1970s, something called the Institute for Workers' Control, which represented all the stewards right across industry, supported by Jack Jones. They came up with an industry plan for cars. And they had already seen how in Japan they were developing prototypes of electric cars. They were already in touch with what was a new thing at the time, climate scientists who were talking about the need for change and how we had to address those changes. And they came up with a plan for their industry. All the shop stewards were involved about how we needed to transform, including British Leyland, into producing electric cars. And their plan was rejected. It was rejected. And it has taken, another 40 years to see electric minis running off the assembly lines at Cowley. And I think there is a lesson there, because I think if you involve people, if you give people a sense that we can be creators of our own futures, then you inspire people. And we have got a lot to give. So we want that just transition, a just transition to cut carbon. We want to be proud of the work that we do and the organizations we work for. We want a maximum temperature, working temperature, which we do not have in this country because people are sweating, particularly people in strenuous work with no protection at all against the new extreme temperatures that we're facing. But most of all, please remember, we want a voice. We want to be part of this. Marvin talked about diversity. Believe you me, there is a need for class diversity as well. And working class people want to be listened to and want to make their contribution. So thank you for everything you do, and best of luck for the future.
Thank you. Thank you. Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm just going to update people on the list. I've got a nice queue, so I'm going to ask Jonathan Ashworth next, then Rokhsana, and then Luke, if that's okay. So, yeah, next we've got Jonathan Ashworth, who is Secretary of State for Health. No, Shadow.
Sadly, only the Shadow Secretary of State for Health, but I'm looking forward to being promoted to be the Secretary of State for Health, so thank you very much. Good evening. Real pleasure to address the SERA rally. My first time addressing the SERA rally conference. I sincerely hope it won't be my last time addressing the SERA rally at conference. But it's a real pleasure to be here. And I just want to speak very briefly to make the point that we are facing a climate change crisis. And that is also a health crisis as well. Because the impact of climate change means worsening health conditions in society, and we have to do something about it. And that is why my speech to the party conference, it was yesterday, I think, but it feels like it was, yes, it does feel like a month ago, but it was actually yesterday. I made the commitment that with a Labour government, should I be the Health Secretary, I would declare a climate emergency across the NHS. And the and the reason I made that commitment is because our NHS actually emits more CO2 than all the passenger flights at Heathrow Airport across the whole of the NHS. So we know that climate change affects health outcomes, whether that's the heat waves of the summer, which affect particularly the vulnerable. We know that the emissions being produced by the NHS affects our deteriorating, contributes to the air quality deteriorating. And we know that on some estimates, air pollution is killing around 40,000 people a year in England. We also know that we have some of the highest rates of death for asthma in Europe for our adolescents and our young people and teenagers. So I really do think that it's time that the NHS should take its responsibilities to climate change seriously, which is why I said we would declare a climate emergency. And what does taking its responsibilities to climate change seriously mean? Well, it means for me instituting a Green New Deal for our NHS. It means that as we invest in our NHS and upgrade our hospitals and facilities, we should upgrade in a way which is environmentally friendly, which is sustainable. Where hospitals can make use of solar panels, we should be using solar panels. We should be upgrading and replacing our fleet of dirty vehicles, the diesel guzzling ambulances, with low emission vehicles. We should be investing in better energy efficiency schemes across the hospital and health facilities estate. And also we should, which was a bit of a symbolic gesture, but I think symbols are important, invest in the green space across our National Health Service, which is why I said we'll plant 1 million trees across the NHS, because the symbolism is important, but also investing in green space in our NHS has an absolutely crucial therapeutic value as well for recovery, particularly for those in a mental health trust, for example, but more broadly as well. So a Green New Deal across our NHS is what I've committed to at the Labour Party conference yesterday, and what we'll do if we get into government in the next few weeks when that general election comes. And this is really, really important, because we have to look at the potential of the public sector generally and how we use our investment in the public sector to meet our targets and our obligations and our responsibilities to dealing with climate change. So on the NHS side, I've said our aim should be to get to a net zero NHS, and that is what we're going to do with the capital investment. But I just wanted to tell you that this is a commitment for the whole of the Labour front bench, a commitment that we're all dedicated to working towards, and this really will make a difference to the future of the country. Final thing, before I rush off to the next event. There's loads of events going on. It's very conference seems to get more and more events every year that we have to speak at. What we should do is we should just get everybody in a big room, and everyone could just speak in the big rooms. We could call it the Labour Party conference or something like that. You know, when you look about what's happening, I think there should be obligations on me as a potential Secretary of State, but also statutory obligations on the NHS, but all public sector organisations, to always think about health inequalities and the Sustainable Development Goals, and making decisions which are in the interest not just of today's generation, but future generations also. So in Wales, they have something called the Future Generations Wellbeing Act. And the Future Generations Wellbeing Act in Wales prevented an expansion of a relief road around Newport, because when the expansion of the relief road around Newport was proposed, it was challenged on the grounds that how can this be in tune with your commitment to the sustainability goals? And how can this be in tune with your commitment to always put the well-being of future generations first, given the environmental and air pollution and other implications of you building this new relief road around Newport? And because of the Future Generations Wellbeing Act in Wales, which is on statute and enshrines in law these commitments, the Welsh Labour government decided not to proceed with that relief road expansion. So I'm saying that in England, we need a similar statutory framework, and we will introduce a Future Generations Wellbeing Act for England as well, which will make sure all our public services and me as the Secretary of State for Health will have a legal obligation to challenge health inequalities in every decision that we make, and we aim towards meeting the sustainability goals. So that is what we're going to do in government. That is a measure of our commitment on this agenda. A Green New Deal for the NHS, the greenest health service in the world, is what we should be getting to. That's my commitment, and that's what we're going to do. So we've got to make sure we get elected and we get a Labour government in the coming weeks. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And I think that was a first. I don't think we've had a Shadow Secretary of State for Health speaking at the SERA rally. So that's particularly excellent and another first for us this year. So thank you. Right, OK. Next up, we've got Rokhsana Fiaz, who is the Mayor of Newham.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Okay, so climate and environment emergency rapid response. So I've got about 4 minutes, and I hope that it's an appropriate rapid response. But I also want to just do a shout out to my Commissioner for Air Quality and Climate Emergency, who is rightly sitting in the front row because he's going to be very attentive, because he's going to help me drive the transformation that we are about to embark on in Newham, which is a local authority in the East End of London, for those of you that don't know. So like many other local authorities, we've declared a climate emergency, and I just want to provide people with some context relating to Newham. We are the 9th largest local authority in the whole of the country. We have a current population of 343,000 people, and in the next 10 to 15 years, our population will increase to just under 250,000. We have the youngest youth population profile of any local authority in the country, and we are the most diverse. We have some 242 languages or dialects spoken. So selling this issue and compelling people to adapt lifestyles, to embrace different approaches, can be very challenging. We've adopted a public health approach to our response to climate emergency, and like other local authorities, we're aiming to get to carbon neutral by 2030 and carbon zero by 2050. But we've got a huge amount to do, and the reason why we've anchored our approach to climate emergency on the public health perspective or health is because, in echoing what John Answorth was saying, we have the highest number of people in London that die as a consequence of toxic air. We have some 96 people in Newham each year that die as a consequence of toxic air. I'm just going to allow you to just register that statistic. We have the highest rates of young kids under the age of 14 that are admitted to hospital because of asthma. That far outreaches any local authority in London. So it's really imperative from a health perspective that we fully embrace this agenda. In any case, the manifesto commitment was to fully embrace the Mayor of London's sustainable transport agenda, which, as you know, is looking at shifting to 80% of travel in London to those relating to walking, cycling, and using public transport. We have just over 50% of our population that use cars, and invariably there will be resistance. We are going to have to approach the way in which we deal with regeneration and concepts of placemaking to completely redefine what we mean and how we construct neighbourhoods, as well as ensuring that we involve our residents in that planning and construction of neighbourhoods that are fit for purpose not only for the 21st century but respond to the demands rightly that we need to respond to in terms of climate justice and the climate emergency facing us. We have ensured that climate emergency is a key feature of our local economic plans, which we are advancing through the prism of community wealth building, making sure that the £1.5 billion that we have as our annual budget is critically examined to ensure that throughout all aspects of what the council does, we're taking into account our requirements of climate emergency. In terms of practical implementation, we've calculated that we've got 4 budget setting cycles from now until 2030. So we've just embarked on our first ever 3-year budget setting cycle. Previously, before I stepped into office, the council used to set budgets every year, which is just really insane because you can't kind of embed that long-term thinking. So what I've tasked officers and cabinet members to do across every single service area to critically think about the role that their service area needs to play in delivering our climate emergency agenda. So we've got 4 budget cycles we're going to have to undertake, and we're presently having passed our strategic intent paper on climate emergency last week at full council. We are tasking everyone to think really seriously about how we need to prioritise the response to climate emergency in a way that's proportionate, that is viable, that is sensible, but will enable us to reach our carbon neutral target in 2030 and then carbon zero by 2050. Those are the only 2 time points that count. I'm going to just briefly talk about something that was raised in relation to just transition, and just transition is and has to be a really important feature as part of the as part of the process of ensuring that we're carrying everyone on this journey, because it's going to be hard. It's going to be it's going to require us to think very critically about some of the industries and sectors that we've been embracing. So just transition at a local level could be innovative things as basic as providing opportunities for car mechanics to begin to train in new skills to be able to become mechanics for electric cars, which will become a dominant feature in our roads as we encourage the price convergence between electric cars and petrol and diesel, which I understand is going to happen circa 2021. We've established internally a air quality climate emergency task force, and that's again about marshalling every single part of the council to this priority. But it's more than just the internal. It's about ensuring that we engage, yes, with our residents, for whom, for some, it will be quite challenging because of a whole range of issues, but it's also about our partners, our health partners. They have a huge amount of spend, but how do we work with them coherently to marshal all of our resources to embed this approach in a way that demonstrates our commitment in practical ways to the emergency facing us. I'm going to end by saying part of our ambition is also around seeding the sectors of the future, the ones that are cleaner and greener. So we have London's only enterprise zone. It's called the Royal Docks Enterprise Zone. Over the next 25 years, some 45,000 jobs will be created, some several thousand homes. It will become London's new business innovation district. So I've made it clear that I'd like the Royal Docks to build on its past as the centre of the country's industrial golden age and actually demonstrate the role that it can play in the new age of green technology. And it's also about ensuring that we also provide the challenge. So in our borough, we've got City Airport, and I've made it really clear that the expansion plans that they're proposing don't, at the surface, in the absence of information, align with their stated commitment to climate emergency. It's about taking a stand and giving voice to opposition to expansion of airports. And I've also similarly done the same with regards to Silvertown Tunnel, which is a major transport infrastructure project being pushed by the Mayor of London. And as much as I admire everything that the Mayor of London is doing, as a comrade, it's important in my role as a Mayor of Newham that I also make a stand and push back when I think the agenda on climate emergency is being compromised and jeopardised. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We're almost at the end. There are still seats, so if people want to stay for the last few, and there's 3 seats here, 1 seat there, don't feel you have to stand. Now's the time to move. But come on, we've got our last but one speaker. I'm extremely pleased. We've got Luke Pollard, who is the Shadow Minister for Fisheries, Flooding, and there's something else, isn't there? What's the third thing?
So many other things.
Everything that can go wrong.
Hello, SERA. My name's Luke Pollard. I'm the Labour and Cooperative Member of Parliament for Plymouth, Sutton and Devonport, and I am the Shadow Minister for everything wet in the Labour Party. So from flooding, fisheries, water, coastal communities, puddles, ponds, canals, everything. And I briefly want to tell you about 2 protests that I'm incredibly proud of that happened in the last week. The first time was the global climate strike, and each and every one of you probably had a protest near you in your part of the country. I saw young children leave school with their families in many cases to make a statement about what type of world they want to inherit. A world that was not on the brink of climate disaster, a world where species and habitat loss has been reversed, a world where they can breathe clean air, a world when there is fairness marching hand in hand with environmentalism. And I was so goddamn proud of those kids. I really am. And to see the passion, not just in Greta in New York, but of the 5 and 6-year-olds in Plymouth, of the young children that were making a stand, not with party politics in their mind, but with passion about what type of world they wanted to live in, what type of world they wanted for their families. And I was truly inspired by that. And the second protest I was very proud of is seeing the people come together just a few days ago here in Brighton and campaign for Labour to be an out-and-out Remain party. Because both of those matter. We can't fight climate change if we're subject to Brexit. And I am very proud to be one of those people that says our future should be within the European Union, and I will continue to campaign for that, because we can't tackle climate change if we are an island, inward-looking, introverted, isolated, and alone in the world. That is not how we defeat climate change. That is not how we march climate justice hand in hand with social justice, and it is something that I think this party will reflect on in the coming days and reach the right conclusion very, very soon. The climate emergency that we declared as members of Parliament in Westminster happened because we didn't take no for an answer. Because when Sue Hayman first went up to the dispatch box at DEFRA Questions, which I know you all watch religiously, in the House of Commons, and challenged Michael Gove to declare a climate emergency, he said no. When I challenged him the week after, he said no. When we challenged him again in a debate, they said no. And then when we attached a vote to it, they realised they could not win. And Britain became the first country whose national parliament declared a climate emergency. And that is something that we as a party should be incredibly proud of, our role in changing the agenda. And the agenda has changed. So I want you all to remember one thing, and to be a challenge to corporations, councils, companies, individuals. What are you doing differently now that Parliament has declared a climate emergency? What are you, as an individual, as a council, as a party, doing differently? And if the answer is nothing, if nothing has changed, apart from perhaps a dial-up of a bit more spin, That is not a good enough answer. And that is a challenge that we should all be clear about. Because as part of the Shadow DEFRA team, with some fantastic Shadow Ministers, working closely with our Bays team, our Treasury team, and Labour colleagues in local government, we need to be bolder and swifter with our action and more determined that we need to defeat the Tories to tackle climate change properly, because there are 4 dangers that prevent us from achieving that type of world where we want to achieve, that we heard from speakers today: Brexit, austerity, inequality, and climate change. Those 4 dangers need to be tackled in a coordinated, joined-up way so we can give hope to those young people that we saw, so we can make sure we do it true to our internationalist values. And that means looking at the topics where we don't normally talk about. So let's talk about water policy. I know it's not very exciting, you might think, but water's our 4th most carbon-intensive industry in the world. Every drop of water that you use has been treated, pumped, purified, and will be treated again on the other way out. It's carbon intensive, so let's value every single drop. Let's make sure our fishing industry fishes at a sustainable level, preserving jobs in our coastal communities and also the fish stocks that we rely on around the coast. And let's make sure that we start what Plymouth has done last weekend in declaring Plymouth Sound the country's first national marine park. The post-war Labour government created national parks. The next Labour government will create a network of national marine parks, not just valuing our protection, but building on marine citizenship so our young people can access the mental health improvements, the diversity, the biodiversity, the opportunities, the job creation that our marine environment presents it. I think it is a genuinely exciting thing to do. And comrades, I just want you to continue. I want you to continue fighting for what is right, because we are on the cusp of something special in the next Labour government, and we need to make sure that climate change is in every single party policy we have. As we've heard tonight, we have a real opportunity together. Thank you, comrades. Keep fighting.
That was amazing, and it's showing we're saving our best till last, and we're saving our very best till very last. So I'm building you up, Jake. Our last speaker is Jake Sumner, my fellow co-chair.
Thank you very much, and thank you for staying till the end. And I think it's just, I'll reflect a little bit on some of the speeches we've had actually as well. And we've seen a very good cross-section from our front bench spokespeople to mayors. And it's showing what Labour can really do when they're in power, as we've seen with the mayors, but also why we need a Labour government. But really what we have here is a watershed moment. I think Luke summed it up very well just at the end of his speech. Because tomorrow we're going to be debating climate change on the conference floor. And it's a watershed moment because we can bring our whole Labour movement together to show the plan of action and our direction of travel on what we want to do. And it's important because we heard from Francis tonight on how important it is for the workers to be part of that conversation. And many of the other speakers who talked about how we need to work with people, not to people, in how and how we make the changes ahead. So that is for tomorrow. But we also need to get a Labour government in to deliver all the programmes and all the policies that we've heard about today. But I want to just say a couple of other things, really, because how we talk about climate change and how we achieve the changes that we need, there's a few things that have come about. And one is we need systemic change across our economy and across our society. And there is a tendency, and you see it perhaps in the media, where it's often painted as individual choices. And those individual choices are much harder to make when we don't have the systemic change and to make the easier choices. So there are individual choices we need to make. Luke outlined some of those, but we also need systemic choices, systemic change across the economy as well. We need to have a climate conversation with people, as I've said before, and actually John McDonald said in his press conference a few weeks ago, it's a chance for us to unify the country, because really we can bring everyone together. The environment touches every person's life, it's our future, and this is a moment. But we also need to champion that future of what our green programme can achieve. And we've heard some of the things today. We've heard it in some of our other events and speeches. And I think we had a bit of a debate in one of our sessions earlier where a point was made, we should say that the future's awful. And then that is actually how we're going to bring people with us to achieve the change that we need. Actually, I think things like clean air are really important. I want to have clean air. I want to have public transport. I want to have more affordable green homes. All of these things are achievable, and we can achieve them. But we need to talk about those benefits that they bring. And lastly, we need a rapid response, and that is the theme of our conference programme. And really, there's too much climate complacency about, and particularly in relation to the government. And we saw in the spending review that they achieved, that they announced a few weeks ago, of £30 million given to an action on climate change. I mean, that is just unbelievably ridiculous. So really, what we do need, and we need to action now, and yes, we talk about targets, we talk about what needs to happen ahead, but what we can do now is have a climate emergency spending review. And what that is looking at all government programmes and projects through a carbon lens. And why do we need that? Well, because there's too much government activity at the moment that is not in that direction. You know, there's countless examples, but I'll just a few. I mean, the government wants to increase VAT on solar panels, domestic solar panels, from 5 to 20%. It's the export support is supporting Bahraini oil refineries. We had a discussion today in one of our sessions around the carbon price, which is not connected to net zero. But there's a raft of things, and we're not having the transformative change that we need. So a climate emergency spending review, we will look at all that expenditure and target it in the right direction to meet those zero carbon targets that we must meet. So that is what we are arguing for and we're pushing for, and Labour can argue for that and make sure that hold the government's feet to the fire on this. And finally, I will end with a quote. I really like this quote, and I've said it before, but I'll say it again. And it's: the greatest threat the planet faces is the belief that someone else will save it. We're the people that are going to do the saving, us in this room, the people we work with, and that is what the Labour Party will do, and that is why we need a Labour government, and we need Labour mayors to make the changes and to really achieve what we've laid out today and what everyone's talked about. Thank you.